The boy never reached the coordinates. His ship crash-landed on the wrong rock, a cold, nameless world the old Gunslinger had only mentioned in passing, a planet that had refused to appear on star maps for 2 centuries. The boy died in the crater. But the coin survived, and something on that planet, something that had been buried for longer than humans had walked the stars, picked the coin up, read the coordinates, and understood them. 45 years later, an old man on a quiet ranch lights his lamp at dusk and sees 3 words burned into the wood of his porch. You promised. If you're new to Orbit Cowboy, ride with us, saddle up, and subscribe. Now, let's begin. Kade Brennan was 78 years old, and he had been alone for 19 of those years. His ranch sat on the eastern slope of a bone-dry valley on Halverson's Reach, a colony world the galactic surveyors had filed under the category of unremarkable. That was exactly why he had chosen it. Halverson's Reach had 3 suns, 2 moons, no significant mineral wealth, and a population of less than 4,000 humans spread across an area larger than 3 Earth continents. The mail came once a month. The nearest neighbor was 40 miles away. The night sky, when the suns finally set in their long, staggered procession, was the kind of black that swallowed sound. That was the night the porch began to speak. He had been lighting the oil lamp on the railing, an old habit predating electricity, predating the colony itself, when he saw the marks. 3 words burned into the wood beside the door. Not carved, not painted, burned, the way a brand burns into hide, the way a circuit burns into a wall during a power surge. The smoke was still rising from the grain. You promised. Kade did not move for a long time. The lamp flame in his hand trembled, then steadied. He was not a man who startled easily. He had been a gunslinger in his younger days. Not the romantic kind from the colony stories, but the kind who took contracts in the Outer Rim during the long, cold years before the Concord treaties. He had killed men. He had killed worse than men. He had buried friends in soil that did not freeze and friends in vacuum that did not let bodies fall. He did not startle, but he knew that handwriting, it was not handwriting at all, really. It was a script, angular, 6-stroked, with the small cross-hatch beneath each character that marked the syllabic endings of the Vraxian dialect. He had not seen that script in 45 years. The boy had drawn it for him once, on the back of a tin cup, with a piece of charcoal pulled from a dying campfire. The boy whose name he had stopped saying out loud the night the boy left. The boy who had taken Kade's coin and never come back. Kade set the lamp down on the porch rail. He lowered himself slowly, his knees were not what they had been, and traced the burned letters with a thumb that did not shake. The wood was warm, not lukewarm, hot, as if the burn had happened a moment ago, and not, as the dust drifted on top of it, at least an hour before. He looked up at the sky. The first sun had set. The second was a low orange bruise on the western ridge. There were no ships. There were no engines. There was no smoke trail and no signature of a landing thruster on any of the 4 ridgelines around his property. But 3 words had burned themselves into his porch, and whoever had written them had used a language that, as far as Kade Brennan knew, no living human had ever learned. He went inside. He closed the door. He bolted it. Then he walked slowly to the locked drawer in the kitchen sideboard he had not opened in 19 years. The drawer was not locked because it held anything valuable. It was locked because it held the things Kade had decided to forget. He sat at the kitchen table with the drawer's contents spread in front of him, a thin pile no larger than a paperback novel, a campaign ribbon from a war the official records claimed had never happened, a photograph of a woman whose name he no longer permitted himself to think, a field issue identification disc, scratched and dulled, and, underneath it all, a small folded square of cloth with something heavy in the center. He unfolded the cloth. The coin sat in his palm. A copy. The original he had given to the boy 45 years ago. He had kept the duplicate the way a soldier might keep a duplicate dog tag. On the front, the silhouette of a horse against a setting sun. On the back, 4 sets of numbers, etched so finely they looked like part of the metal's grain. Coordinates, 12 digits, across 2 galactic sectors. The coordinates pointed to a planet that did not, by every official galactic registry, exist. It had a name once. Or rather, it had been given a name once, by Kade himself, in a logbook that had been incinerated 3 days after the war, that nobody had won. He had called the planet Soft Iron. He had no idea why. The name had come to him in the same way the planet had come to him, without invitation, without explanation. In a dream, he had walked into the way other men walked into rooms. The boy had asked him about the coin one night by a campfire during the long 10-month journey from the prison hold where Kade had found him to the colony where Kade had eventually let him go. The boy had been 13 then, or what passed for 13 among Vrakians who aged differently from humans and lived longer. Kade had said, "If you ever need me, you come to that place. I'll be waiting." He had been lying. He had no intention of going there. He had no intention of ever again seeing the planet he had named in a dream. The coordinates were a sealed door for him, a door he had walked away from in the war and could not bring himself to walk back through, not even for the boy. He had given the coin out of love, the way a coward gives away a key to a house he will never live in. 45 years, and now 3 words on his porch. Kade closed his fist around the coin until the engraved edges bit into his palm. The boy had not made it. He had always known the boy had not made it. The boy's signal had stopped 14 months after they parted at a coordinate Kade had never been able to identify. Until tonight, Kade had lived with the small, cold comfort that the boy had simply gotten lost in the dark, that the silence had been distance, not death, but something had read the coordinates. Something had followed them, something on a planet that should not exist had carried that coin all the way to Halverson's reach, all the way up his porch steps, and had branded its message into his door. He stood up. He walked to the closet. He took down the long oilskin he had not worn in 19 years. He took down the gun belt he had not buckled since the day he buried his wife. He took down the boots that still fit, somehow, the way good leather fits a foot that has stopped growing for half a century. He looked at himself in the small mirror on the inside of the closet door. A 78-year-old man with a lined face, a white beard, and eyes the color of cold water. he said out loud for the first time in 19 years. "All right, kid, I'm coming." The nearest spaceport was in a town called Drovers Cross, a 6-hour drive across hardpan in the rust-orange truck. Kade had not started since spring. The truck started on the second try. Kade took that as either a sign or a warning. He didn't decide which. By the time he reached the outskirts of Drovers Cross, the second sun was setting and the third was already beneath the horizon. The town's perimeter lights blinked on in the falling dark, a pattern of white and amber that should have been comforting and was not. Drovers Cross was a small town, 300 people maybe, a general store, a feed depot, a mechanic's bay, and a single landing pad that handled cargo runs from the orbital relay twice a week. Kade did not know any of the current residents by name, but he had come through here often enough over the decades that the older faces nodded at him in the street, and the younger ones knew, in the wordless way of small colonies, that he was someone you didn't ask about. He parked the truck outside the general store. He sat for a moment with his hands on the wheel. He did not know exactly what he was doing yet. He needed coordinates checked. He needed a transport. He needed to know whether anyone in Drovers Cross had seen something land in the past week. Anything unusual, anything off-pattern. He needed answers, and he needed them quickly, and he needed them from people who would not ask him why. He stepped out of the truck. The town was empty. Not quiet, empty. The general store's lights were on. The neon sign above the feed depot buzzed. The mechanic's bay door was rolled halfway up, with a half-disassembled rotor still on the workbench. The landing pad's beacons rotated their amber and red sweep across the pavement. There were no people. Kade walked the length of the main street. The boots he had not worn in 19 years made a sound on the boardwalk that was, in the absence of anything else, embarrassingly loud. He looked into the store. The till was open. There was a half-eaten sandwich on the counter. He looked into the depot. A radio was playing music, low, an old country station broadcast from the colony's only satellite, a signal that traveled in a hopeful loop around the planet. There was a coin on the counter of the depot. Kade walked over to it slowly. It was the same coin he had given the boy. Not a copy. Not the duplicate he had carried in the cloth. The same coin, worn down on one edge from where the boy had carried it for 14 months in a small inner pocket of his flight jacket. The horse on the front had a small scratch through its mane, where the boy had once tried, in the manner of children, to sharpen the image with a pocket knife, and only succeeded in marking it. Kade picked the coin up. It was warm. Not lukewarm. Warm the way a coin is warm when it has just left someone's hand. He turned slowly. He looked back down the empty street. He looked up at the second-floor windows of the few buildings that had them. He looked at the high ridge of the colony's water tower, silhouetted against the last light of the third sun. There was nobody. But somewhere in the town that should have had 300 people in it, somebody had just put down a coin. Kade's hand went to the gun at his hip. The weight of the holster was strange after 19 years. He realized with a small and detached part of his mind that he had forgotten exactly what it felt like to draw down on something he could not see. The radio in the depot kept playing. The neon kept buzzing. The amber landing pad beacons swept their slow, patient circles across the empty pavement. And somewhere very close to him, something exhaled. It was not breath. It was not wind. It was the sound of something old, something patient, something that had been waiting for a very long time, finally allowing itself to be heard. Kade did not run. Old men do not run, even when they should. He walked back down the boardwalk in measured steps, his hand on the grip of his pistol, his eyes scanning every doorway and every alley and every shadow under every awning. The town stayed empty. The exhale did not repeat. He stopped at the saloon. The saloon's door was open. The light inside was warm, yellow lamplight on dark wood, the kind of light that promised a kind of company humans had been promising each other for 10,000 years. He stepped inside. There was a man behind the bar. The man was wiping a glass with a cloth. He looked up as Kade entered and smiled, a calm, unhurried, unsurprised smile. "Evening, Mr. Brennan," the man said. "Wondered when you'd be along." The voice was wrong. It was not wrong in any way Kade could immediately name. The accent was right. The soft, trailing vowels of a colony-bred English, with the small, flat cadence of someone who had grown up on a colony that had once been mostly miners. The words were right, the smile was right, but the rhythm was off by a fraction of a second, as if the man behind the bar had practiced this scene many times and was performing it now with great care, but had not quite mastered the timing of human speech. The bartender set the glass down. He poured something from a bottle without looking, the way a man pours a drink he has poured 10,000 times. He slid the glass across the bar to Kade. "On the house," the bartender said, "you always took whiskey neat. Kade did not move toward the glass. "Where is everyone?" The bartender's smile did not change. "Resting. The whole town. Resting." "Yes, sir." Cade's hand was still on the grip of the pistol. He had not yet drawn. He had spent 40 years learning when to draw and when to wait, and the thing behind the bar was not, by any measure he could yet articulate, ready to be shot. "What are you?" Kade asked. The bartender looked at him for a long time. Then it said, in a voice that was suddenly not the bartender's voice at all, that was lower, older, with a six-stroked Braxian sibilance running underneath the human consonants, "I am the thing that read the coin, Mr. Brennan, and I have been waiting for you for 45 years. The next chapter goes deep, partner. If this ride's keeping you company tonight, hit that bell. The story Kade Brennan is about to walk into, you don't want to miss what comes next." It told him in pieces. It did not tell him in order. It did not tell him in any way that a human would have called a confession or an apology or even an explanation. It told him the way a stone tells a river, by being present and unmoving and very old. It had been buried on the planet Kade had named, soft iron, for somewhere between 400,000 and 4,000,000 years. It did not know the exact figure. Its species, if it had been a species, and not something singular, did not measure time in revolutions. It measured time in decisions. It had made very few decisions. It remembered each one. It had been awakened by the boy's ship. The boy had crash-landed on soft iron not because he misread the coordinates had been correct, but because the planet's gravity had pulled him in, the way a gravity well pulls in any small ship traveling at velocity. The boy had not been able to slow down. The boy had not survived the impact. The thing behind the bar said this without inflection. As if reporting a sunset, the boy had been carrying the coin in a small inner pocket of his flight jacket. The thing had found the coin on the boy's body. It had read the coordinates. It had understood that the coin was, in the language of Vraxians and the language of humans both, a debt, a promise, an obligation that one being had made to another and had not yet fulfilled. The thing on soft iron had no concept of debt, but it had spent 400,000 years, or 4,000,000, doing nothing but observing the small civilizations that occasionally landed on its surface and died there, and it had developed something that, in the absence of a better word, it called curiosity. It had decided to find the man who owed the boy. That had taken 45 years. It had not been 45 years of travel. The thing did not travel in any way Kade could imagine. It had been 45 years of learning, of teaching itself the rhythms of human speech, the smell of human ranches, the way human towns went about their evenings. It had visited Drover's Cross, the bartender said 17 times in the past 4 years alone. It had walked the boardwalk. It had sat at the bar. It had ordered drinks it did not consume. And tonight, finally, it had emptied the town. "They are not dead," the bartender said. "They are resting. I will return them when our conversation is finished." "What do you want from me?" Kade said. The bartender looked at him for a long time. The boy, it said, did not die immediately. Cade's hand tightened on the grip of the pistol. "He lived for 19 days in the wreckage. He spoke, in those 19 days, of you. He spoke of the war. He spoke of the coin. He spoke of the place you said you would meet him. He died alone, Mr. Brennan." "And I would like to understand," the bartender said with the patience of something that had waited 4,000,000 years to ask a question. "Why?" Kade Brennan had not spoken about the war in 19 years. He had not spoken about the boy in 45. He had buried both with the same kind of finality, the way a man buries a dog he has loved and cannot replace. He had built a ranch on a colony that did not matter. He had outlived his wife and his sister and the 3 friends who had come back from the war alive. He had outlived the war itself, and all the men who had ordered it, and the country that had pretended it had not happened. He had outlived every one who had been there, except apparently this. He set the pistol down on the bar. Slowly, he pulled out a stool and sat. The thing behind the bar did not move. Its eyes, the bartender's eyes, but no longer pretending to be the bartender's eyes, watched him with the absolute stillness of something that had nothing to lose by being patient. Kade started talking. He told it about the war first. The long, undeclared war between 3 human colony coalitions and a Vraxian splinter faction that had broken from the Vraxian Concord over a dispute about mineral rights on a moon nobody had ever lived on. He told it about the orders. He told it about the prison hold and the children, the Vraxian children, taken as collateral during a raid. kept in conditions that even the soldiers who had taken them would not later admit to. He told it about the morning he had walked into that hold with 3 other gunslingers and an order to clear it. He told it about the boy. The boy had been the only survivor of the cell when Kade had reached it. The boy had looked up at him. The boy had not begged. The boy had looked at him the way a creature looks at the thing that has come to kill it, without surprise, without protest, with only a kind of exhausted recognition. Kade had not pulled the trigger. He had taken the boy out of the hold. He had hidden him in the supply bay of his own transport. He had spent 14 months smuggling the boy across 2 galactic sectors to a colony where the Vraxian Relief Network could place him with a family. On the last night before he handed the boy over, he had given him the coin. He had told him, "If you ever need me, you come to that place. I'll be waiting." He had lied. "I gave him the coordinates of Soft Iron," Kade said, "because Soft Iron was the place where I had seen, in the war, what humans were capable of doing to each other and to your kind. And I had decided that if I ever went back there, it would mean I had nothing left to lose." I gave him the coin, and I told him I would meet him there, because I believed, I told myself, that he would never need to come. He had a family now. He was safe. He would grow up. He would forget the coin. I gave him the coin so I could keep telling myself I had saved him. And then I never went back. I never even thought about the coordinates. I burned the maps. I burned the logs. I burned the planet out of my memory because I could not bear to remember the place where I had seen what I had seen. And the boy went looking for me. And he died alone, on a planet I had named in a dream and could not bring myself to open my eyes about. Kade was quiet for a long time. The thing behind the bar watched him. "That is why," it said. "Finally. That is why." The thing behind the bar did not respond immediately. When it did not respond in the bartender's voice. It responded in a voice that Kade had not heard in 45 years. A voice that he had heard once at a campfire on the 10-month journey across 2 galactic sectors, in the quiet hours when the boy thought he was sleeping. It was the boy's voice. It was not a recording. It was not a mimicry. It was the boy's voice the way the boy had spoken at 13. Thin, careful, with the small Vraxian sibilants under every English consonant, with the slow, grave rhythm of a child who had learned early not to waste words. "Old man," the voice said. Kade did not move. "I am not him," the voice said. "I want you to understand that. I am not the boy. The boy died in the wreckage. The boy is not in this voice. The boy is gone. But I have carried him for 45 years. I carried him out of the wreckage. I carried his words. I carried his question. The question he asked in the 19 days again and again before he stopped asking. The question was, did the old man forget me? And I have come across 45 years and a great distance to give him the answer. Kade's eyes were closed. The answer, the voice said gently, is that the old man did not forget him. The old man only refused to remember. And those, the voice said, are different things. The thing behind the bar the boy's voice, the bartender's body, the 4 million-year-old patience, leaned slightly forward. I have one contract for you, Mr. Brennan, the last one of your career. It is the contract you owe the boy. Stand on the surface where he died. Speak the boy's name aloud in the place where he last spoke yours. Bury him. It is the only contract I have ever offered. It is the only one I will ever offer. And if you accept it, the town will wake. The boy will rest. And I will return to the place where I have been and stay there until the next thing that owes a debt comes to me to settle it. The thing extended a hand across the bar. In the palm of the hand was the coin. Kade looked at it for a long time. Then he reached out with a hand that was old and lined and steady, steadier than it had been in 19 years. And he took the coin. I accept, he said. The ship that came down for them was not a ship. It was a shape. Kade did not later try to describe it even to himself. It came at the edge of the town, settled silently on the landing pad, and opened a door that was not exactly a door. Kade walked into it carrying the coin in one hand, and the gun belt, unbuckled, slung over his shoulder, in the other. He had not fired the gun. He suspected he would not. The journey took, by his perception, 4 hours. By every clock he had ever owned, it took a single breath. Soft iron was as he remembered it, and as he had refused to remember it. Cold, pale, a surface the color of old steel, with a low blue sky and a thin atmosphere, and a wind that whispered without ever rising. He stepped down from the ship that was not a ship, onto a soil that did not crunch. The wreckage was where the thing had said it would be. It was very small. After 45 years of weather that did not weather, it was nearly intact, a standard short-range transport, the kind a young Vraxian male would have purchased with the savings of a foster family on a colony that had taken him in. The hull was cracked along its belly. The cockpit was open. The boy was not inside. Kade had not expected him to be. The thing which had walked beside him from the ship gestured toward the rise above the wreckage, a small mound, stones placed by hands that had not been human. The boy had been buried, the thing told him, on the 3rd day after his death. The thing had done it. Kade walked up the rise. He stood at the head of the mound for a long time. The wind, which did not rise, moved across the surface of the planet without touching anything. He took off his hat. He said the boy's name. He had not said the name in 45 years. He said it now, 3 times, the way a man says the name of a son he has been afraid to claim. He set the coin on top of the stones. He set his hand beside the coin. He stood there with his hand on the cold stone for a long time. When he turned to leave, the thing behind him spoke once more, in its own voice, not the bartender's, not the boy's. A voice older than language. The contract is fulfilled, Mr. Brennan. You may go home. Kade walked back to the ship that was not a ship. He did not look back. When he stepped out onto the landing pad of Drover's Cross, the second sun was rising. The town was awake. The bartender was wiping a glass behind the bar and looked up at him with mild confusion, as if he had only just noticed Kade walking in. The general store was open. The radio was playing. There was no coin. Kade got into his rust-orange truck and drove home. When he reached the ranch, the porch was clean. The wood where the words had been was unmarked, as if it had never been touched. He lit the lamp. He sat down. And for the first time in 45 years, Kade Brennan said the boy's name out loud into the empty evening, just to be sure he could still say it. He could. The dusk fell, the first sun set, the night came down soft, and somewhere on a planet that did not exist, on a surface that did not weather, beside a small mound of stones, something old and patient settled back into the soil and slept. That was the Gunslinger's last contract, the story of Kade Brennan, the coin he gave away, and the thing on soft iron that carried it back 45 years later. The next one is already loading. Saddle up, subscribe, ring the bell, ride with us every week. And before you go, partner, drop a comment below. If you were Kade Brennan, would you have gone to soft iron the first time the boy needed you? Or would you, like he did, have given the coin away as a promise you never meant to keep? Until next time, keep your guns clean and your stars closer.